All the clues are in those 5 to 7 pages.
The biggest clue that he gives is a word search.
It's definitely somewhere in the mid-Atlantic to the south.
It's safe to say that Eric and I have found every word in the word search.
And to see if it was a QR code.
You just gave out our best solve.
I'm the person you want on your team. Like, I could probably do most of it on my own.
It is somewhere along the Appalachian Trail.
Off the rockers, like the stuff that they're like, he hit it on the backside of the moon. We can get there.
Yeah.
Welcome back, folks. It has been quite some time. My name's Eric. I'm here with my best mate, Christian. We are back in action. I want to reintroduce ourselves. So if you are a subscriber already, you know that we kind of got off in the weeds and talked a lot of politics. This is not meant to be a political channel, not our vibe. That just happened to be relevant at the time, and we made some mistakes. We put our faith in some things that certainly didn't come to pass, but now we're going to be talking about something that surely will come to pass. Christian and I are now in a book club. And the book that we are reading is the greatest book ever written, called There's Treasure Inside by Jon Collins Black. Christian, you want to tell us a little bit about There's Treasure Inside?
Yeah, so this book, Eric actually is the one that told me about this book.
Yeah, well, actually, I have my wife to thank.
Yeah, your wife's the one that found it, right?
Yeah.
It's awesome. So basically, long story made short, there is a guy who made a lot of money on Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, and he had looked for the Forrest Fenn treasure. So those of you that don't know, Forrest Fenn hid a treasure out in the Rocky Mountains, and it took what? Was it 10 years, Eric, to find?
Yeah, I think he hit it in 2010. Somebody found it a couple months before he died in 2020.
Yeah, so it was just hidden out there. There was like a poem that he put out of clues to find it. It was worth like millions, right?
Yeah, I think at auction went for about $1 million.
This guy, Jon Collins Black, actually looked for that treasure. Didn't find it, but looked for it. And because of that experience, he decided to make his own treasure hunt. And what's actually really cool about it is some of the treasures that he hid are from the original Forrest Fenn. He got them at auction and put them in the boxes. But basically, he hid 5 boxes throughout the country. So 4 smaller boxes that are at auction are worth somewhere in between $100,000 to $300,000. And then 1 box that he calls the lion's share, which is at auction between $2 and $3 million. And they're hidden somewhere in the U.S. And then he put out this book, and the clues to all these boxes and where to find them are in this book. So I've become a reader. I haven't read a book in probably 2 years, but now I'm reading every single night, and I'm completely obsessed.
And I don't know how to read, so Christian's just my audio book now. So
That's right. That's right.
One thing I like about the book is that because there's multiple treasures, the likelihood that one is like not terribly far away, that it's accessible to a greater number of people, is really high. So this book came out in October. I think it released, and then most people didn't get their books until like November. So it's kind of going into winter, but none of the boxes have been found. So now we're in March of 2025. So it's been almost 5 months since the book's been out. None of the boxes have been found yet. And unlike the Forrest Fenn treasure, which like in 2010, that was kind of like, the smartphone had just come out. The way social media works and the way people gather and share information just wasn't at the point where it was as readily accessible, or maybe it was, but just like people didn't necessarily run to the internet to share what they knew and, create and collect ideas from other people. So like now on Reddit, there's just like swarms of people that are discussing this stuff. Most of them are off their rockers, like the stuff that they're like, he hit it on the backside of the moon. We can get there.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting to seeing how different people can read the same things that I'm reading, because it's very cut and dry. Where there's like a part 1 of the book with clues to the lion's share box. It's 200 pages. And then part 2 of the book is about like 5 to 7 pages for each of the per box for each of the smaller boxes, and all the clues are in those 5 to 7 pages. So it's not hidden, like a crazy cipher throughout the book that you got to decode. Like all the clues are, and it's just interesting. Different people arriving at different places with the exact same information. So like one thing that Christian and I wanted to do really badly was make sure we read the book and tried to figure out where the clues led without the aid of Reddit, at least for the most part, because I didn't want any confirmation bias or to be swayed by the clowns of Reddit on where, and I've never used Discord. I guess there are like droves of people on Discord, a greater number of people discussing this on Discord. But yeah, so this one in particular was keeping us up at night. And to this, I mean, this has been out for 4 or 5 months now. I haven't seen a single person come up with something that makes any remote sense. And so Christian and I are ready. We're willing to go. If there's a legitimate solve and we think like, yeah, it's got to be in this mount, like, you know, this national park or whatever, like, we would go. Like, we would go this weekend, but we've been, we've had the book for like, 3 weeks, 4 weeks? And,
yeah, 3 or 4 weeks.
Just focusing on these 5 to 7 pages, I have no clue. And I mean, when I say that I'm pretty good, if we're in an escape room together, I'm the person you want on your team. Like, I could probably do most of it on my own. I'm like a one-man show. I mean, it's my happy place is studying clues. And, you know, so this guy, tell me a little bit about the background of the dude. Like, so.
Well, Eric, before we get to that, I think it's important that we like explain the 4 boxes. So we talked about the big box, right? The main box, the 5th one is called the lion's share. But what I think is cool is in part 2, he breaks down each of the boxes. And so the first box he calls the Forest Fin box. And what's neat about these boxes is he had a famous blacksmith build these boxes, and each one of them is like a puzzle box. So you actually have to figure out how to open them. And he makes it very clear that once you find them, there is instruction, so you don't have to break the box, because the boxes themselves are valuable because of just the craftsmanship behind it. But the first box is the Forest Fin box, and that one includes items from the original Forest Fin treasure. And it's believed that box is somewhere in the area of where Forest Fin hid his original one.
Well, I think he's really clear that he kind of says Jon Collins Black alludes to the fact that he hid it where he expected to find Forest Fin's treasure.
Yeah, where his solve was for Forest Fin, right?
Yeah, so he spent the entire year in 2016. Like, he said he worked full time trying to find Forest Fin's treasure, which is absolutely insane. My wife and I, we went up to Montana and Wyoming one time to look for it, and it's wild how, you know, if you're coming here and you're familiar with the Forest Fin treasure, how difficult to pinpoint exactly what Forest meant. It meant what was in his head, basically. It was so hard to know exactly where on a map. And as soon as you get out into the wilderness, especially the Rockies, man, everything looks so big, and you're like, oh crap, it could literally be anywhere. The world is just so much bigger when you actually go to these places. And so this box in particular, I'm a little concerned about even going for it. It'd definitely be the one I would want the most, because it has the handwritten, or not a handwritten note, but it has a jar with a note from Forest Fin that only Jon Collins Black, who bought it at auction, and Forrest, who's now dead, knows what it says, which I think is really cool. That's pretty cool. Like, I would love to see into the mind of the person. And it's just because Forest Fin treasure really captured, I don't know, my imagination in a way that I haven't had. And it was right during, you know, COVID that I started getting into it. And so in the fact that it has some of that original treasure is a pretty cool, I don't know if you call it Easter egg, but a pretty cool, has some relevancy anyways. But it's by far the hardest of, you know, because he wrote a poem just like Forrest did, and it's just really, really tough to pinpoint. But the next one is, I think, like a little bit more in people's wheelhouse, the Pokemon box. He basically writes a story about a road trip. It puts it at least it couldn't be just anywhere in the United States. It's definitely somewhere in the mid-Atlantic to the south. I feel like Christian and I, as we've read this, it just on the heels of going through the next one we'll talk about, is which is what we're gonna try to divulge in this video. It just seemed so much like a breath of fresh air, right? Like, felt like you could actually point to a map and be like, okay, at least whether we're right or wrong, at least we can, you know, we could put a pin in the map and say, well, let's give it a shot.
That box is cool because he actually has, so it's called the Pokemon box, and it's like Eric said, he writes a story, and it's very like whimsical, and he makes it seem like he's, you know, having conversations with actual real Pokemon and going through that. And in that box are 2 PSA 9 Charizards. I mean, similar to like the one that the Paul brothers wore like around their neck with tons of diamonds, which I think is really cool. I'm not a big Pokemon guy. I had a few when I was a kid, you know, but I understand the value that's there. And
yeah, so just those 2 cards right there are probably $50,000.
Yeah, exactly. And so the fact they're in that box is really cool. I really like the box specifically. So that one is like a Japanese style puzzle box.
Yeah, definitely the coolest one.
Yeah, it looks amazing. I mean, the craftsmanship is second to none.
Beautiful.
But it references like his trip to Japan and his love for the treasure or the puzzle boxes that he found when he was there in Japan, which I thought was really cool. And then the next box, like Eric said, is the one that we've worked the hardest on. That's the past and future box. I'm with Eric. I've yet to hear anyone that has a decent solve for this. The biggest clue that he gives is a word search. It's safe to say that Eric and I have found every word in the word search, but now figuring out how to, put those together and decipher them is where the challenge lies. Like, I feel like we've found everything that's there, but how do you put it together and make a decent solve out of it? So that one's been difficult for us.
Dude, not only that, like you and I have come up with ideas. I mean, we think like some of the people on Reddit are crazy, but we've come up with every possible idea for a solve. Easy, difficult, going as far as trying to see if it was a QR code, which no one even suggested, but it was like, oh my gosh, it's really possible. Tried every combination to see if it could scan like some kind of data code or barcode it's just
hopefully it's not, Eric, because you just gave out our best solve.
So
hopefully we did it correctly.
I'm so confident it is not a QR code. That's pretty cool if it were, but it's just not. Let's dive into it a little bit. So there's basically two.
Hold on, we forgot one last box.
Okay. Oh yeah.
So the last box is the Appalachian footpath box, is what he calls it, and he admits in this chapter that it is somewhere along the Appalachian Trail. Well, anyone that's looked at a map knows that the Appalachian Trail is forever long, so it doesn't narrow it down very much, but at least we have an idea of where to start looking. Yeah. And the interesting thing about that box is he includes a map. I mean, it's obviously, it has to be deciphered and it has to be, you have to figure out what he means by this map, but it's the only one that has like a true treasure map, which I think is kind of cool.
So for me, I like this one a lot, and this isn't much of a secret, but there's this particular place in upstate Vermont, really close to the Canadian border, where allegedly this trail matches very, very closely, and dozens of people have gone up there looking for it already, before the snow, during the snow. No one's been able to find it, even though there's like a start here, end here. Who's to say if it's meant to be like an exact map or what? I think this is one of the coolest ones because it can only be so many places, and I think piecing it all together. So we know this one's in the Appalachian Trail. The Forest Fen box, burden of proof would be on actually finding it, but it's 99.9% chance it's in the Rocky Mountains somewhere. And then the Pokemon box is somewhere in the mid-Atlantic to the south, but probably not also in the Appalachian Mountains, right? So probably somewhere in the south, which means that the past and future box kind of makes sense that it would be on the West Coast, because I don't think there are any on the West Coast unless the lion's share box is on the West Coast, and this is, I don't know, in Alaska or the Dakotas or somewhere else that makes them spread out. I'm not really sure, but I think for the purpose of this video, we're just trying to see if there's anything, as we go over it. There's two puzzles in particular. So he talks a lot about Bitcoin, which is